If you're a fan of a team in the NFC, you should watch this video. And I'm not trying to scare you or anything, I'm just trying to alert you of the situation at hand. The Dallas Cowboys are coming off what some would call a disappointing season. They finished the regular season with a record of 12-5, went on to beat a finally old-looking Tom Brady in the playoffs, but then lost in the divisional round versus the 49ers. It was that game that ended with Zeke under center, and then Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, got fired after. But despite that disaster of an ending to last season, I think the Cowboys have a legit chance to win the NFC East and maybe go as far as the NFC Championship game. The Cowboys quietly had one of the best off seasons in the NFL. They added a bunch of key pieces and didn't really lose any guys in free agency. Yes, they released Zeke, but that was a good move to free up cap space, and obviously they have Tony Pollard and they did draft Deuce Vaughn. The Cowboys just didn't add players though to add them. They added key pieces that addressed their weaknesses from last season. Let's start with one of their big weaknesses from last season, the cornerback 2 spot. It was one of the 2 weak spots in that consistently improving and ascending young defense. So what did the Cowboys do? They went out and traded for Stephon Gilmore, and they only had to give up one of their 2 fifth-round comp picks. Yes, Gilmore is 32 years old, but he's still playing like one of the top corners in the league. Statistically, last year he was a top 10 corner on one of the worst defenses in the league. Now you pair him with Trayvon Diggs, who's a Pro Bowl cornerback, and a pass rush that's really, really good. I think his numbers are going to get even better this year. So I said that there was 2 weak spots on Dallas's defense, and the other weak spot was their interior defensive line. They had a ton of trouble stopping the run last year. They re-signed defensive tackle Jonathan Hankins, which seemed like an obvious move that they were going to make, but also in the first round of the draft, they went out and drafted defensive tackle Mazi Smith. Smith is just an athletic freak for a guy of his size. I feel like he does have boom or bust potential because, I think we see that a lot with guys who are super athletically freaky and really big, but I do think he's going to be able to make an impact this year on the Cowboys defense just because of how much they have struggled stopping the run. Now moving over to the offensive side of the ball. So much of how far the Cowboys go hinges on one man, and his name is Dakota Rain Prescott. Dakota Rain did not have a good season last year. I don't think anyone will argue that he did. He led the league with 15 interceptions despite missing weeks 2 through 6 of the season. So yeah, 15 interceptions in 12 games, and that's not a great ratio. But the thing is this, interceptions have not been a problem for Dak throughout his career. His interception percentage for his career is 2%. That is tied for the 9th lowest interception percentage in NFL history, even after last season's 15 interceptions. Also, let's not forget, Dak had surgery on the joint above his thumb in his throwing hand during the season. So that held him out for week 2 through 6. He finally returned in week 7, but you can't tell me that didn't have an effect on how he threw the football. Like, this surgery was done in season. He didn't have ample time to recover. He was back out there pretty quick. Last season was also the first season since 2017 for Dak without his number 1 wide receiver, Amari Cooper, who was traded in the offseason to the Browns because of their cap situation. Yes, CeeDee Lamb is a number 1 wide receiver and a really good wide receiver, but it's definitely a shift for a quarterback to go from having 2 legit number 1 wide receivers to that one go-to guy. And yes, if you're a good quarterback, you should be able to play plenty fine with a legit number 1 wide receiver and just one legit number 1 wide receiver. But come on, it is a transition. It is a little bit of a transition. But since the talent at wide receiver definitely went down a notch from the previous seasons last year, the Cowboys went out and decided to trade for a wide receiver, Brandon Cooks. In my opinion, Cooks has been one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL throughout his career. In his 9 NFL seasons, he's had 6 with over 1,000 receiving yards. But the thing is this, he has caught passes from 10 different quarterbacks in his career. Talk about being consistent no matter the circumstances. Yes, Cooks is now 29 years old, but he's still a speedy wide receiver. Maybe he's not as fast as he was his first few years in the league, but he's still going to be able to lift that defense, bring that secondary up a little bit so those underneath routes have some more space and have some more room to work. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Cooks has like around 800 receiving yards or more, because if teams are doubling CD, I think Cooks is going to eat. I think we're going to see Dak's game improve a lot from last season because of this addition at wide receiver. He has now 2 really reliable guys, and Michael Gallup still on this team. I think he's going to do well in that 3rd wide receiver spot. And obviously the thumb being good to go should help a ton too. There's just one thing he really needs to do, and that is perform in the playoffs. That has been the biggest knock on Dak, and he hasn't really been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. Yes, they finally won that playoff game last year versus maybe not the best Tampa Bay team. It was a low-scoring game versus the 49ers, definitely within reach, but he lost to Brock Purdy in a game that the defense allowed the Cowboys to stay in despite the offensive struggles. Listen, this defense is really, really good and should help carry this team. I'm sure so many quarterbacks would like to have a defense on the other side of the ball like this Cowboys defense. So Dak needs to take advantage of that. And also, the coaches can't be drawing up plays like this or this QB draw with seconds left in a playoff game. They just can't be doing that. They're not making things easy for Dak there. So I'll say this, the Cowboys are one of the most well-rounded teams in the NFL, especially on paper. But the thing is this, what's on paper doesn't always translate to the field in the NFL. We all know that. But if you're a fan of a team in the NFC, I think you gotta be a little bit more worried about the Cowboys than a lot of people are making them out to be. I think they're an underrated team heading into the season that can definitely compete with the Eagles for the top spot in the NFC East.